When I finished the second body of work, participatory, after a series of impossible destructions and failures, I concluded that working in institutions were in contradiction to the social sculpture I was exploring. Even though there were several explorations that brought about transformation and revealed emergent properties from the participants, I decided to look for different settings. I needed a more intimate setting, an experience of one-to-one work. Around the time I started to think about making more intimate and connected work with my family, my mother arrived to Miami Beach for a visit and vacation. I decided to start the work with her. A few days after her arrival, I told her that I wanted to do some work with her for my research. So we started going to my studio at the Art Center, South Florida. To be with one's own mother is not unusual. It is a common situation. The difference in the 6 social sculpture explorations we made during the first period of working together is that we were in a non-familiar space, an art studio. We went there wearing specific clothing that we chose together. I had my dress, my nightgown. For my mother, I bought a short blouse made with the same material. We also had the tripod and the camera. We did not have a preset something to do. Rather, we agreed to be there, to be aware of each other's presence, and to experience the moment, the situation, and the riff. The difference between being in the studio and going out, for example, to an ice cream place with my mother was the experience of awareness and connectedness. And those were my thoughts during the experience. I used the approach of awareness and connectedness with the world around us and inside us, and an intention of exploring those connections with no reasoning, but rather by developing the senses through the new organs of perception. This gave the element of poiesis to the time I spent with my mother, an educator who always explored new pedagogies through the arts for teaching children. She always said that no matter what an educator does, without love it does not work properly. My mother's position on education resonates with Shirley Sachs when she states that connectedness is about developing the skill of hearing. When she describes the University of the Trees, Sachs writes,
"Standing in the forest one day, I suddenly realized that I was in a university and that if one could develop the patience and the skill to hear, see, and understand, one would find that all the trees were teachers."
During my childhood, I always heard my mother talking about building bridges with other humans and the environment, using poetry to teach children and valuing all the arts, other humans and nature. Perhaps her vocabulary was naive, but the core of her daily speech is similar to the ideas of Sachs' connectedness, as well as Boyce and Steiner's understanding of inspiration and active listening as body senses that help us to be connected. In Death Keeps Me Awake, Wolfgang Sumdick explains empathy as an element of education.
Educating our inspiration leads to self-awareness of the world. It is not only oneself that deserves such attention, but other human beings and things as well. What is crucial in this is that empathy for the other is never lost. Inspiration arises primarily from the ability to inhabit the feeling world of others. To do this, one has to learn how to enter the emotional experience of others and allow it to move in our inner world. This active listening involves a state of contemplation, in which personal responses to observations are muted and stilled. The contemplator has to become all eye, all ear, activating the inner senses, the sense of rhythm, of life, of balance, enabling the one contemplating to become one with the other, with the object of contemplation.
Steiner's understanding of inspiration and its relation to awareness and empathy were ideas that influenced voice and resonate with my mother's everyday discourse as an educator and human. My mother's thinking on teaching, education, and pedagogy is relevant. Her notions are important because they resonate during our work. It appears in how she and I work together, whether it is with the sign we encounter with letters, meeting in progress, or in how I prepare. I intentionally do not bring planning into the action as I want to keep the flow of derive method, and that is the space that I prepare us to be in. The preparation allows us familiarity with the space and the camera. We work together in an assemblage to be able to be within and with the camera. She learns how to be with the camera, and as I observed her, I learned too. What is similar between us are the innovative methods of not leading too much, which is teaching by not guiding, or not telling, but instead leaving space for experiencing and observing. The question of teaching is not part of this project, but it is in the wave of the work. Voice social sculpture has a stronger pedagogical presence, but like mine, is not hierarchical. In Temor, which was the second exploration with my mother, we find a small signboard that said "Meeting in Progress." I brought this sign into the frame because it was in the room in that particular and appropriate moment. Although I could have discarded it, I realized that it was a non-human participant that was there as part of the environment, and I recognized it as I was derived in. Even though there were more objects in the room, this one became a participant because there was a relation between it and me. When I look at it, it sparkled my imagination, inspiring me to make something with it. If that sparkle would have happened with other objects, they would have become participants as well. But on that particular day, at that particular moment, it was only this small sign. This sign had a statement written on it in movable letters, and it also had a characteristic of giving us the possibility to change that statement. My mother turned the sign around and took the letters, and she suggested that we look for words to make from those limited letters. My mother took the lead, and I followed her. The sign with movable letters connected my mother's with the blackboard that, as a teacher, she used for decades. The first word that she made was temor, which means fear in Spanish. We entered a silent dialogue through the words we could put together on the sign and had only the letters contained in the phrase "meeting in progress." Temor, fear, was the right word for that moment. a process of connectedness and transformation began. The camera was there, but it did not change our attitudes as much as it did before, perhaps because the board was between us and the camera, and that put the camera on the other side of it from us. The board and its letters started a dialogue between my mother and I, the board and the camera, as part of the camera was hidden by the board from my point of view, or my face was hidden by the board from the camera points of view. The list of words we made were sí, no, temor, pensé, sin temor, and meeting in progress. In the same order, the translation is yes, no, fear, I thought, without fear. And for the last one, we left the sign as we encountered it with meeting in progress. I was present and connected with my mother, and a plethora of fragmented memories from both life and dreams were mixed. That internal chaos is intense, it is profound, but it is ineffable. Later, I was editing without my mother's presence. I experienced the Sisyphean labor that Barthes refers to. I repeatedly watched the videos of the explorations my mother and I had made and tried to produce a sentence that would describe what we had experienced, but every time I was about to, the stone rolled down and I had to start the work of climbing again. Finally, I realized that an unplanned secular ceremony was unexpectedly happening in our social sculpture exploration. There was only one repeated element, the clothing we were wearing. Together, we were creating a ceremony, and that was all. In Conectadas, we were able to create the atmosphere of presence and stillness which made us profoundly connected. Things came out in a wordless dialogue. We sat, and both of us were calm and connected to one another, acknowledging an inner space with no identity or center to hold on to. Being aware of the presence of the camera caused us to stay within its frame. The camera created the sense that it needed a slow pace, more time. And it was during that time that my mother and I connected. And at last, I started sensing the camera assemblage. I cannot say that the camera had an intention, but I can say that its presence influenced my pace. It reminded me that I am there in that moment and space because I want to find something. I need to be aware of every detail with all my senses, and that requires connectedness. In my work, the camera is a non-human participant that, with its presence, conditions our process of connectedness. First, through our being aware and somehow scared of the possibility of the judgment of the other. Through the camera, which made us uncomfortable. As the encounters went forward and we became more used to the camera presence, we slowly took more time for it. The camera became a participant, and this was when our process of inner connection took place. As I was finalizing this body of work in February 2020, I asked my mother to send me something about those explorations we did together. I said, "Is there anything you want to comment on?"
Yo sentí, vestida de blanco y vos de blanco, que cualquier cosa que pase, dolorosa o alegría o tristeza, o lo que sea, o la misma distancia, siempre estamos unidas por algo. Jamás el lazo entre vos y yo jamás se romperá. porque yo soy tu mamá, vos sos mi primera hija, y siempre, a pesar de vivir distantes, a pesar de ser distintas, de ver cosas distintas, de sentir cosas distintas, pero hay una esencia invisible que siempre, siempre nos va a unir. Eso es lo que yo sentí cuando estábamos haciendo ese trabajo, las dos juntas vestidas de blanco.
It was during this body of work that I realized the importance of the role of the camera, how it was much closer than any other non-human participants. The camera has a unique role in my work that is closer to being something between a family member and a colleague. The intimacy I reached during this period, the stillness and silence, made me aware that social sculpture explorations were being determined by the constant camera presence.
I remember the preparations of each summer in my childhood. In the Southern Hemisphere, school finishes in December, and summer vacation is from mid-December till mid-March. Right after the holidays every year, we departed from the city of Buenos Aires to a little house in a tiny town called Santa Teresa, where we spent every summer during my childhood. The full preparations were made by my mother and my nonna. My father was in charge of the car and his camera. My father's camera, a 35mm Voigtlander, was a sacred object that rested all year in a drawer no one should ever open. No one said so, but somehow we all knew. In a ceremonious yearly silent preparation, my father, after slowly gathering a cigarette holder and lighting a cigarette, prepared his camera for the year's vacation. We knew no one should get close to him nor talk to him. And he sat and cleaned all the parts, sat the 35mm roll, and placed it next to him for the next 30 days. My father's camera was a sacred object I never touched. When I turned 10, my godmother's communion gift to me was a 110mm camera, compact. The roll was a cassette with a very small negative. It used to come in 12 or 24. When I got that camera, I became the family photographer all year round.